Hello, I'm Alma Angeles, and you're watching Eagle News International. Good evening, CJ.
Good evening, Alma, and good evening to everyone joining us in the broadcast. Here are the top headlines tonight.
The ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza was holding on Saturday as humanitarian aid began to enter the Israeli blockaded enclave ravaged by 11 days of bloodshed and a war of words as both sides claimed victory.
A series of strong earthquakes rattled northwest and southwest China, leaving at least 2 people dead, local officials and seismologists said.
The Department of Health is now investigating the alleged illegal online selling of government-procured jabs in the cities of Mandaluyong and San Juan.
And acute malnutrition stalks the diamond-rich but fragile Kasai region in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the world's worst-hit country in terms of food insecurity, according to the United Nations.
The ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian militants in Gaza was holding on Saturday as humanitarian aid began to enter the Israeli blockaded enclave ravaged by 11 days of bloodshed. Now both sides are claiming victory after the Egypt-brokered truce, which also included Gaza's second most powerful armed group, Islamic Jihad. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel's bombing campaign had killed more than 200 terrorists in Gaza, and for its part, Hamas political chief Ismail Haniyeh said they had dealt a painful and severe blow that will leave its deep marks on Israel. He also thanked Iran for providing funds and weapons. Take a look.
أزف إليكم هذا النصر العظيم الذي سجلته المقاومة الباسلة. هذا النصر الإلهي الاستراتيجي المركب في هذه المرحلة من مراحل الصراع مع العدو الصهيوني. ولا يسعني إلا أن أوجه شكر للذين قدموا المال والسلاح للمقاومة الباسلة، الجمهورية الإسلامية في إيران، الذين لم يبخلوا عن هذه المقاومة بالمال وبالسلاح وبالتقنيات.
זה אפשר לנו להשיג את יעדי המבצע בהצלחה יוצאת דופן. לא הכל ידוע עדיין לציבור. אגב, לא הכל ידוע עדיין לחמאס. אבל מכלול ההישגים שלנו ייחשף במהלך הזמן. חיסלנו למעלה מ-200 מחבלים, ביניהם 25 בכירים, כולל מח"טים. מח"טים זה מילה שכדאי להבין אותה. בעזה זה הקבלה לאלופי פיקוד. אם החמאס חושב שנסבול טפטוף של רקטות, הוא טועה.
As thousands of displaced Palestinians returned to their homes and Israelis began to resume normal life on Friday, international focus turned to the reconstruction of the bomb-shattered Gaza Strip. In Jerusalem, however, Israeli police cracked down on stone-throwing protesters at the highly sensitive Al-Aqsa Mosque compound in a sign of how volatile the situation remains. 2 weeks after similar clashes sparked the conflict's worst escalation in years. Israeli forces beat an AFP photographer who was covering the unrest there. Clashes also broke out in several other parts of Israeli-occupied East Jerusalem. And at the crossing point between Jerusalem and the West Bank, Israeli police said, adding that hundreds of officers and border guards had been mobilized. The flare-up began in Jerusalem, sacred to Jews, Muslims, and non-Muslims. Its holy sites have sparked many of the worst episodes of Israeli-Palestinian violence. On May 10, an Israeli police crackdown on Palestinian worshippers at the Al-Aqsa Mosque compound prompted Hamas to launch rockets into the Jewish state.
The Philippine government, through the Department of Foreign Affairs, welcomed the truce between Israeli forces and the Hamas militant group after 11 days of relentless aerial exchanges that killed hundreds and injured thousands. The DFA, in a statement Friday, said, quote, The Philippines welcomes the ceasefire agreement reached by Israel and Hamas. The Philippines acknowledges the efforts of several countries, including Egypt and the United States, in facilitating the agreement. The ceasefire entered into force after Egypt and Qatar brokered an agreement between the two parties to halt the bloodshed. Local reports said at least 232 Palestinians, including 65 children, died from the Israeli airstrikes. About 12 people, including two children, meanwhile, were killed by the rocket fires of Hamas and other militant groups towards populated areas in Israel. Based on the DFA's last bulletin, no Filipino has been reported among the fatalities and injured. The deployment of Filipino workers to Israel has been suspended, although the processing of those who have qualified continues.
Now, with a ceasefire in place in the Middle East, world actors are now shifting their focus to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, which had already been grappling with the coronavirus pandemic. U.S. President Joe Biden has vowed to work with the Palestinians to rehabilitate Gaza while attempting to sideline and weaken Hamas. Take a look.
There is no shift in my commitment, the commitment to the security of Israel, period. No shift, not at all. But I tell you what there is a shift in. The shift is that we still need a two-state solution. It is the only answer. And I'm prepared to put together, and I'm going to attempt to put together, a major package with other nations who share our view to rebuild the homes, and without re-engaging, without providing Hamas the opportunity to rebuild our weapon systems, rebuild the Gaza, rebuild Gaza.
Colleague Mark Lowcock, the emergency relief coordinator, today allocated $4.5 million from the Central Emergency Response Fund towards the rising humanitarian needs in Gaza. This is in addition to the $14.1 million which he announced earlier this week for the occupied Palestinian territory, which comes from the central pooled funds for the OPT. So that total amount as of today of money we have dispersed is $18.6 million.
Convoys of lorries carrying aid began passing into Gaza through the Kerem Shalom crossing after it was reopened by Israel, bringing much-needed medicine, food, and fuel. The UN Central Emergency Response Fund said it had released $18.5 million for humanitarian efforts. Tens of thousands of Gaza residents ventured out on Friday for the first time in days, checking on neighbors, examining devastated buildings, visiting the sea, and burying their dead. Rescuers there said they were working with meager resources to reach any survivors still trapped under the rubble.
In other news, a series of strong earthquakes rattled northwest and southwest China, leaving at least 2 people dead, according to local officials and seismologists early Saturday. Both Qinghai province in the northwest on the Tibetan Plateau and Yunnan province in southwestern China are areas prone to earthquakes, and both tremors were shallow, meaning they generally cause more damage. The Yunnan quake, which had a magnitude of 6.1, struck first at 9:48 p.m. Friday, or 13:48 GMT, near the city of Dali, a popular tourist destination, the U.S. Geological Survey said. USGC or GS said it was followed by at least 2 aftershocks, and 2 people were confirmed dead in the mountainous area, local officials said in a statement. Later on, state news agency Xinhua said at least 22 others had been injured. Then, a few hours later, at 13:04 GMT, more than 1,200 kilometers away, a 7.3 magnitude quake jolted China's sparsely populated Qinghai province in the northwest, followed by an aftershock. Local media published videos showing ceiling lamps swinging and vases falling off shelves, as well as groups of people who had run outdoors after the quake. In Yan'an, the provincial government said some buildings had collapsed and others had been damaged, and the disaster situation was undergoing further verification. The China Earthquake Network Center, or CENC, warned people to stay away from buildings in a post on the Twitter-like Weibo platform. The quake monitor said the earthquake followed a series of smaller quakes less than an hour before. China is regularly hit by earthquakes, especially in its mountainous western and southwestern regions.
To the U.S. now, where 2 people were killed and several wounded in a shooting in the city of Minneapolis late on Friday, U.S. time. Local law enforcement said 1 man was left in a critical condition following the attack in the downtown area of the city, which was where George Floyd was murdered by a police officer in May 2020. Minneapolis police tweeted there were 10 victims in total, 5 of whom were male and 5 female. The 2 people shot dead were both men, according to the force, adding order had been fully restored to the scene and surrounding areas. Floyd, a 46-year-old black man, was murdered by Derek Chauvin, a 17-year veteran of the Minneapolis Police Department. Chauvin was convicted on April 20 of murder and manslaughter for his role in Floyd's death.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Friday emphasized the importance to have greater global solidarity in order to defeat the coronavirus disease. Duterte made the call in his speech at the 26th Nikkei conference on the future of Asia, Malacanang said in a press statement. Quote, "First, we are only as strong as our weakest link as a country and as a region. And as one global community, this is why we need greater solidarity for collective, coordinated, and comprehensive responses. Inward-looking policies will lead us nowhere," Duterte, as quoted by the palace, said. Duterte, or Malacanang said, assured participants in the Nikkei Forum that the Philippines supports all avenues for increased production of COVID-19 diagnostics, therapeutics, and vaccines. He thanked Japan and other partners in the Vaccines Global Access, or COVAX facility, a global initiative that guarantees access to COVID-19 vaccines worldwide. The COVAX facility, Duterte said, has benefited many developing countries, including the Philippines.
Staying in the country, Dr. Annalisa Ong Lim from the DOH's Technical Advisory Group talks about what happens when delaying the second dose of the vaccine. Let's take a listen.
Karaniwan, ang epekto ng bakuna, mararamdaman natin yan makatapos ng 2 linggo. And particularly, kung 2 dosis dapat yung bakuna bago makumpleto, we can only expect yung quoted efficacy rate to start being felt 2 weeks after the second dose. Well, syempre kung hindi natin makumpleto yung takdang dosis, talagang hindi natin maaasahan yung kabuuan ng proteksyon na gusto sana nating asahan galing dun sa bakuna. And pero siguro yung assurance is kahit nakaligtaan mo yung schedule or hindi ka talaga makarating dun sa schedule na yon, kailangan lang na ihabol yung ikalawang dosis para maabot mo pa rin yung proteksyon na inaasahan. Hindi na kailangan ulitin pa yung unang dose na natanggap. Well, syempre, we want people to come back as soon as possible. Pero hindi naman, wala namang actual dates, no? Ibig sabihin, hindi dahil nakatatlong linggo ka na, hindi na dapat ibigay yung second dose. We still give the second dose. So basically, the sooner you can come back after the missed schedule, pinakamaigi para mas maabot mo na kaagad yung proteksyon na dapat mo matanggap.
The cost of vaccines for priority groups is being shouldered by the Philippine government. The Philippines recorded its highest daily vaccination rate since the National Vaccination Program was rolled out in March, as 229,769 doses were administered last Thursday, breaking the previous high of 120,529 jabs last May 15.
The Department of Health is now investigating the alleged illegal online selling of government-procured jabs in the cities of Mandaluyong and San Juan. During a laging handa briefing, Health Undersecretary Maria Rosario Perqueda said all vaccines available in the Philippines are using emergency use authorization and cannot be sold commercially. More so because it is government procured. Take a look.
At tayo po ay nakipag-ugnayan na sa ating mga local government officials. Sila rin po gumagawa ng kanilang investigasyon. And at the same time, ang DOH po together with DILG ay gumagawa na rin ng investigasyon. So antayin po natin kung ano makalap natin na resulta dito sa investigation. But definitely, kung yan po ay mapatunayang totoo, makita natin yung mga taong gumagawa nito, they will be penalized based on the sanctions that are provided in our existing laws.
A viral post had been circulating online showing that priority slots for coronavirus vaccines are offered at a price by people with alleged connections with the local governments of Mandaluyong and San Juan. In separate statements, San Juan Mayor Francis Zamora and Mandaluyong Mayor Menchi Avalos confirmed that an investigation is being conducted in coordination with law enforcers regarding the report.
Images from a hospital where beds have run out and patients are being treated outside, and a crematorium where funeral pyres are burning continuously in Nepal's capital, Kathmandu. The mountainous nation is seeing a shortage in hospital beds and medical oxygen amid an explosion in COVID cases, mirroring a similar situation playing out in neighboring India. Take a look. Now, neighbors Bangladesh, Nepal, and Sri Lanka are close to running out of vaccines, according to authorities on Friday, and are hoping that China and Russia will bolster South Asia's efforts to tackle a devastating pandemic wave. COVID cases and deaths have hit record levels across India and its neighbors in recent weeks, and all are counting on vaccine campaigns to head off the next surge. Nepal has an estimated 1.5 million people waiting for a second shot of Covishield, with supplies also held up by the Indian export ban. It's now getting through dwindling numbers of Sinopharm jabs given by China. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society said governments and pharmaceutical companies had to help struggling Asian nations where hospitals are overflowing with sufferers.
A spike in COVID-19 cases in Taiwan has burst its travel bubble with Palau, but the small Pacific Island nation's president said Saturday he was ready to reopen the link as soon as practical. The Palau-Taiwan bubble was hailed as a ray of light when it opened on April 1st, but was closed on Wednesday until at least the middle of June as Taiwan battles a coronavirus outbreak. Although the 2 flights a week attracted fewer than 300 tourists from Taiwan in their 7-week existence, Palau President Surangel Whips maintained it was a success. Palau, a nation of about 18,000 people that lies some 1,000 kilometers east of the Philippines, is one of the few countries never to have recorded a COVID-19 case. But its economy was hard hit over the 12 months its borders were closed by the pandemic. Palau President Whip said opening the border meant there was always the risk of COVID-19 cases. But Palau's high vaccination rate, covering 93% of the adult population, provided enough protection to reopen the border safely.
In other news, President Joe Biden acknowledged Friday there is no easy path to getting North Korea to give up its nuclear weapons, but reaffirmed his ironclad commitment to the U.S. alliance with South Korea after talks with President Moon Jae-in. He also said he'd meet with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un if there was commitment to discussion about his nuclear arsenal. Take a look.
Our goal is and remains complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. If he made any commitment, then I would meet with him, and if there was a commitment on which we met. And the commitment has to be that there's discussion about his nuclear arsenal. And if it's merely a means by which, how do we de-escalate what they're doing? And so if that was the case, I would not meet unless there was some outline made that my Secretary of State and others would have negotiated as to how we would proceed.
아울러 바이든 대통령님은 남북 대화와 협력에 대한 지지도 표명했습니다. 미국과의 긴밀한 협력 속에서 남북 관계 진전을 촉진해 북미 대화와 선순환을 이룰 수 있도록 노력할 것입니다. 앞으로도 한미 양국은 긴밀히 소통하며 대화와 외교를 통한 대북 접근법을 모색해 나갈 것입니다. 북한의 긍정적인 호응을 기대합니다.
Another important topic during Biden and Moon's meeting on Friday was their country's ongoing response to COVID-19. South Korea is currently experiencing a shortage of coronavirus vaccines. Approximately 7% of South Koreans have received at least one shot of the vaccine, according to data by the Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency. During the press conference, Moon and Biden announced that the United States would provide 550,000 Korean service members with COVID vaccines.
Meanwhile, the state of California says it will drop all social distancing requirements and allow full capacity for businesses starting June 15. That announcement came as federal health officials acknowledged that not everyone is comfortable with returning to normal. Take a look.
Fears like that are not irrational. I mean, people, it's understandable when you're used to a certain type of behavior. And then when the science says that you can actually turn around that, as we've said with the recent CDC guidelines that say we can feel comfortable, that if you're fully vaccinated, that you are safe from being infected, be it outdoors or indoors, you can understand that when people have been following a certain trend for a considerable period of time, that it may take time for them to adjust. So I would not say that that's irrational. I'd say that's understandable.
The most populous U.S. state suffered a severe winter COVID-19 outbreak, but now has among the nation's lowest infection rates per capita, in part due to its vaccination program. Health Secretary Mark Ghaly said the state will make vaccinations for negative tests mandatory for all major indoor events, but will not operate a vaccine passport scheme. Major outdoor events with over 10,000 people will be allowed to permit those without vaccinations or recent negative tests to attend if they keep their masks on, although private venues are free to create their own restrictions.
Meanwhile, more than 1 million people have died of COVID-19 in Latin America and the Caribbean since the pandemic began. That, according to an AFP count based on official figures as of Friday at 21:05 GMT. The region has also recorded more than 31.5 million infections. Take a look.
Reported today, more Latin American countries than ever before are reporting more than 1,000 COVID cases a day. And our hospitals are fuller than ever. Over the last few months, hospitalization rates among those under 39 years increased by more than 70% in Chile. In Brazil, the highest jumps in hospitalizations have been among people in their 40s. In some areas of the United States, more people in their 20s are now being hospitalized for COVID-19 than people in their 70s.
Now, Brazil continues to record the largest number of new daily deaths with an average of almost 2,000 this week, although that's a one-third drop from 6 weeks ago when it surpassed 3,000. Mexico has made even better progress, dropping from 1,300 daily deaths at the end of January to an average of 170. At the other end of the spectrum, Bolivia and Ecuador have seen daily deaths increase by 44% and 35% respectively over the last week. Argentina and Colombia have experienced 15% and 4% increases in the same period. Etienne blamed the slow vaccine rollout in the region for the problems.
In other news, acute malnutrition stalks the diamond-rich but fragile Kasai region in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the world's worst-hit country in terms of food insecurity, according to the UN. Some 27.3 million people in the DRC are affected by food insecurity, the United Nations said in early April. Take a look.
Oui, avant.
Ici, on a cherché la farine de maïs et la farine des arachides et d'huile. Et on montre aux mamans comment préparer ça. Ils peuvent aller préparer ça à la maison pour les enfants, pour les protéger contre la malnutrition.
Son prénom c'est Joseph. Base et vie. Ce sont des enfants malnutris. Ce sont ceux-là qui sont. C'est gens phase critique. Ce sont ceux-là qui sont ici, qui sont au nombre de 6. Il y a 9 enfants malnutris.
Fièvre. Moi, fièvre, hein? Kolia ezate, bakisi ezate. Bongo ya kukenda bango hôpital, hein? Ezate.
Dutch police were on Saturday investigating a spate of stabbings in Amsterdam, in which one person died and 4 were injured, but said there were no indications of terrorism. Police said a 29-year-old man was arrested at the scene after the attacks happened late on Friday in an area of bars and restaurants near the capital's museum quarter. Police said they were initially called to a report of one stabbing, but on the spot it became clear that 4 other stabbing incidents had taken place in the immediate vicinity, a total of 5 victims. Police said one of the victims died on the spot and the 4 other victims were taken to hospital. The restaurants in the area were closed at the time of the stabbings because of coronavirus restrictions. The Netherlands has suffered a number of terror attacks in past years, including the stabbing of 2 U.S. tourists at Amsterdam railway station in 2018 by an Afghan man who was later jailed.
In other news, Myanmar's junta chief has deposed civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi is in good health and will appear in court within days during the general's first television interview since the coup. Min Aung Hlaing, who toppled Suu Kyi in a February 1 put, gave a 2-hour interview to Hong Kong's Phoenix Television on Thursday with a full program yet to air. The general was speaking in Burmese, and his comments were translated into Chinese by the network. Asked about Suu Kyi's political achievements, the military leader said, in short, she has done everything she can. Suu Kyi has not been seen in public since she was placed under house arrest. She has been hit with a string of criminal charges, including flouting coronavirus restrictions during last year's election campaign and possessing unlicensed walkie-talkies. The most serious charge alleges that she violated the country's colonial-era Official Secrets Act. Suu Kyi is expected to appear in person in court on Monday for the first time after weeks of delays in her legal case. Her legal team have faced an uphill battle to meet with their client in private.
Staying in Myanmar, the junta has threatened to dissolve the political party of ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi over alleged voter fraud in the 2020 election. Union Election Commission Chair Tin So said Friday the investigation into November's election result was almost complete. The Election Commission met with political parties on Friday to discuss potential changes to the electoral system, but NLD representatives didn't attend. Junta leader Min Aung Hlaing has justified his February 1 power grab by citing alleged electoral fraud in the November poll won by Suu Kyi's NLD party in a landslide. Now, on Thursday, local media reported the junta had removed a mandatory retirement age for generals, which would allow Min Aung Hlaing to continue serving once he turns 65 this July. A group of ousted lawmakers, many of them previously part of the NLD, have formed a shadow national unity government to undermine the junta. Myanmar's junta later declared the group would now be classified as terrorists as the military moves to tighten its grip over a country in turmoil.
The Philippine government and the Chinese government have recognized the importance of dialogue to ease tensions in the South China Sea during the resumption of its bilateral consultation mechanism, or BCM, meeting on Friday. In a statement on Saturday, the Department of Foreign Affairs said both sides had friendly and candid exchanges on the general situation and specific issues of concern in the contested waters. The country also reiterated its long-standing call for full respect and adherence to international law, including the 1982 United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, or UNCLOS, and its authoritative interpretation and application, the final and binding 2016 South China Sea Arbitral Award. The virtual meeting came a month after the Philippine government started firing off protests against Chinese presence within the country's exclusive economic zone, as well as its annual fishing ban that encroaches on Philippine waters. Both sides reiterated the importance of the full and effective implementation of the 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea and their commitment to the early conclusion of an effective and substantive code of conduct in the South China Sea.
In other news, international organizations have come together to launch a new One Health high-level expert panel to improve understanding of how diseases with the potential to trigger pandemics emerge and spread. The panel will advise 4 international organizations on the development of a long-term global plan of action to avert outbreaks of diseases like H5N1 avian influenza, MERS, Ebola, Zika, and possibly COVID-19. Take a look.
The COVID-19 pandemic is a powerful demonstration that human health does not exist in a vacuum, and nor can our efforts to protect and promote it. The close links between human, animal, and environmental health demand close collaboration, communication, and coordination between the relevant sectors. One Health is not a new concept, but the high-level expert panel is a much-needed initiative to take it to the next level.
So we need that One Health approach. But let's be honest, the weakest link in terms of our attention as a global community, in terms of our research and our investment in the animal-human environmental continuum is environmental health. And together we can fix that. That means ending overexploitation of wildlife and natural resources. That means having a conversation about global dietary patterns. That means farming that is nature positive. This means finance that doesn't destroy nature. And it means investing in the science and the partnerships across disciplines and capacities so that we're able to prepare and prevent the next pandemic.
The approach is the most important thing you have to do.
The panel will consider the impact of human activity on the environment and wildlife habitats. Critical areas will include food production and distribution, urbanization and infrastructure development, international travel and trade activities that lead to biodiversity loss, and climate change, and those that put increased pressure on the natural resource base, all of which can lead to the emergence of zoonotic diseases. The panel will guide development of a dynamic new research agenda and draw up evidence-based recommendations for global, regional, national, and local action. And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Events happen around us all the time, in our community, in our country, around the world. Events that affect people, move communities, or simply inspire us. Interesting events that people need to know. In these interesting times, we continue to be a competent partner in delivering news about these events. Fast, accurate, balanced. Eagle News, because we live in interesting times.
Welcome back to the news. The IMF on Friday proposed a $50 billion plan to end the COVID-19 pandemic with a target of vaccinating at least 40% of the world's population by the end of 2021. IMF Chief Kristalina Georgieva presented the plan to world leaders at the G20 Global Summit or Global Health Summit in Rome that aims to have at least 60% of the world's population vaccinated by the end of 2022. Take a look.
By now, we all know there is no durable end to the economic crisis without an end to the health crisis. And that means pandemic policy is economic policy, highly relevant for the work of the IMF. And for this reason, we have published today a contribution to the ongoing debates on how to address the gap in vaccines, diagnostics, and therapeutics that many developing countries face. It has three broad elements at the estimated cost of $50 billion. First, vaccinating at least 40% of the global population by end 21 and at least 60% by the first half of 22. Second, ensuring against downside risks such as new variants that may necessitate booster shots. And that means investing in additional vaccine production capacity by 1 billion doses, diversifying production, scaling up genomic surveillance and supply chain surveillance, and contingency plans to handle virus mutations or supply shocks. And third, managing the interim period where vaccine supply is limited with widespread testing and tracing, therapeutic and public health measures, and at the same time, ramping up preparations for vaccine deployment together with any approved dose stretching strategies.
Meanwhile, the European Parliament and EU member states reached a deal paving the way for a COVID-19 certificate that will help open up travel in Europe for the key summer season. Take a look.
Transitional period, it will be more maybe a phasing in that we try to organize now. The phasing in, that means that, of course, we try to be ready with all the member states on the 1st of July and to have the capacity in all the member states to give certificates and to issue certificates from the 1st of July. Maybe earlier certificate, I repeat, the certificate is first of all a tool to prove the situation of one citizen in relation with the COVID. But we have tried to indicate in the regulation that we ask to the member state to refrain to have additional restriction.
The digital COVID-19 certificate is set to allow for anybody living in the EU's 27 countries to secure a digital health pass by the end of June that displays their vaccination status, results of COVID tests, or whether they have recovered from a coronavirus infection. It's seen as a key tool to save the European summer vacation period, allowing countries dependent on tourists to reopen to visitors less likely to bring COVID with them. Other countries around the world have moved in the same direction. That includes Israel with its Green Pass and Britain, which has told its citizens that some international travel will be permitted with an app from its National Health Service. The EU's Health Pass will initially be used only for travel within the European bloc and will be legally valid for 12 months. Any extension will require a new legislative process.
Hackers have stolen data on about 4.5 million Air India passengers around the world in the latest breach reported by a major airline. Names, credit card numbers, and passport information were among the data stolen, according to Air India in a statement released late Friday. The state-owned giant said it was securing the compromised servers and using external specialists on data security, as well as working with credit card companies. Air India announced in March that it had been informed in February by its data processing company, Sita PSS, of a cyber attack. The airline said the breach involved personal data registered between August 2011 and February 2021. Sita, which provides IT backup to much of the aviation industry, said at the time that it had been the target of a highly sophisticated attack that had affected a number of airlines.
In other news, China's Mars rover drove from its landing platform and began exploring the surface on Saturday, according to state-run Xinhua news agency, making the country only the second nation to land and operate a rover on the red planet. Take a look. The launch last July of the Tianwen-1 Mars probe, which carried the Zhurong rover, marked a major milestone in China's space program. Tianwen-1 touched down on a vast northern lava plain known as the Utopia Planitia a week ago and beamed back its first photos of the surface a few days later. The six-wheeled solar-powered 240-kilogram or 530-pound rover is named Zhurong, and China has now sent astronauts into space, powered probes to the moon, and landed a rover on Mars, the most prestigious of all prizes in the competition for dominion of space. The United States and Russia are the only other countries to have reached Mars, and only the former has operated a rover on the surface.
Eagle News will be back with more updates. Please don't go away.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Broadcast journalist Wayne De La Fuente returns on Philippine television and radio to deliver top stories and engage with the country's policymakers, shapers, and movers. Tatalakayin ang mga pangunahing balita alas 7 ng umaga mula Lunes hanggang Biyernes, live sa teleradyo ng Net25 at Radyo Aguila DCEC 1062. Kasama si Wayne De La Fuente sa Balitalakayan.
Welcome back to the news. A huge ice block has broken off from western Antarctica into the Weddell Sea, becoming the largest iceberg in the world and earning the name A-76. It is the latest in a series of large ice blocks to dislodge in a region acutely vulnerable to climate change. Although scientists said in this case it appeared to be part of a natural polar cycle. Slightly larger than the Spanish island of Mallorca, A-76 had been monitored by scientists since May 13 when it began to separate from the Ron Ice Shelf, according to the U.S. National Ice Center. The iceberg, measuring about 170 kilometers long and 25 kilometers wide, with an area of 4,320 square kilometers, is now floating in the Weddell Sea. Icebergs form when hunks of ice break off from ice shelves or glaciers and begin to float in open water. Their formation is part of a natural process, although one which can be accelerated by warming air and ocean temperatures due to human-caused climate change. Earth's average surface temperature has gone up by 1 degree Celsius since the 19th century, enough to increase the intensity of droughts, heat waves, and tropical cyclones.
And the bugs are coming. Billions of cicada nymphs that have been living underground since 2004 will burst out of the soil, shed their skin, mate, lay eggs, and then die, all against the backdrop of the deafening noise that males make to attract females. And some are waiting for their arrival with trepidation. Others, like Dr. Floyd Shockley, can barely contain their excitement. Take a look.
So either one of these directions is going to be good. You can see the shells on the trees. This is perfect habitat. And I see you. Ah, a female. Excellent. Looking along here. So this brood 10, this is the one that's local here in Washington, D.C., and it has 3 species included in it. They are all chronologically sequenced to the same emergence year, 2021. And so we won't have periodical cicadas here in this exact same spot again for another 17 years. So in 2038. Now see, we're in kind of an open area here. Look at this bounty that we've collected today. Associated with the Army has
a new park rising out of the Hudson River has started welcoming New Yorkers. Built on top of 132 concrete plots amidst the remains of Pier 54 and 55 on Manhattan's west side, the $260 million project aims to provide a green space where New York residents can feel calmer and happier, according to a landscape architect. Take a look.
I would like them to leave the city, the traffic, and come into a space and just be surprised, and hopefully at the end of their walk or stroll or run or whatever, leave calmer and happier than when they arrived.
I am so happy to be here today, as New York has suffered so much during this pandemic, and that we're now here celebrating what New York is, how we're always out, how we're always enthusiastic, how we're seeing our waterways. I am just so incredibly happy to be here and to have survived.
And in sports, Philippine boxing icon Manny Pacquiao said he will fight unbeaten unified welterweight world champion Errol Spence in Las Vegas in August. The 42-year-old legend will be fighting for the first time since he beat Keith Thurman in July 2019 for the WBA welterweight title. He revealed his plans with a Twitter post of a promotional poster for the bout captioned Pacquiao versus Spence, August 21, 2021, Las Vegas, Nevada. The Athletic, citing an unnamed source, reported that Pacquiao had signed a deal for a bout to be available on Fox pay-per-view, and the venue was expected to be the MGM Grand. But Pacquiao told The Athletic in an interview from the Philippines that he hoped the fight would be at Allegiant Stadium, the 70,000-seat stadium of the NFL's Las Vegas Raiders. Pacquiao, a serving senator in the country, told the U.S. sports outlet that the fight might be his last. If so, he appears to want to go out with a bang. Spence, the 31-year-old WBC and IBF champion, is 27-0 and coming off a dominant December victory over Danny Garcia, his first fight since surviving a near-fatal rollover car accident.
Finally, in our news, Ja Morant scored a team-high 35 points as the Memphis Grizzlies beat the Golden State Warriors 117-112 in overtime on Friday to close out the play-in tournament and grab the final seed in the NBA playoffs. Morant helped clinch the winner-take-all victory with a spinning floater from 10 feet with 4 seconds left in overtime as the Grizzlies advanced to the playoffs for the first time in 4 years. The Warriors were eliminated from the postseason. That's the shots I want to take, said Morant, who also had a career high 5 threes. He said he likes it when the pressure is on him. He says he lifts his game and he's got all of the confidence in the world in his game. The youthful Grizzlies won 2 straight games in the play-in tournament to earn the 8th seed and will now face the top-seeded Utah Jazz in the first game of their series on Sunday in Salt Lake City.
Exciting games coming up
for this season. Well, a lot of broken hearts after that game. But congratulations to the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
That's it for tonight's broadcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I am CJ Hero. We'll see you again on Monday.
And at the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. We'll see you back on Monday. I'm Alma Angeles, and
we
live in interesting times.